Lesson 4 for Introduction to MICE is all about budgets and contracts. In this lesson, you are expected to identify budget items common to each event or each type of event, calculate and project an event's net income and revenue streams, and discuss the importance of developing budgets and contracts. So, budgets and contracts are the backbone of any event. Walay budget or walay financial preparation nga himuon, any event would not be possible. Budgets must be aligned with the organization's or client's financial goals for the event. The final budget should be mutually agreed upon by the client and the event organizer. So, dapat magkasinabot si client o ang organizer sa final nga budget. And then, the contract will seal the agreement or the deal between both parties, the client and the event organizer. So, in events, budget is more than a pre-event balance sheet. So, it is an action tool that guides the event manager in decision-making regarding all the expenses and revenues, whether the event is managed for a client or for the company itself. So, a budget will either make or break the event. If the organizer wants to produce a very wow or a very impressive event, then that would require a very large budget. And if it's not, if the budget requirement is not met, then the event will not be a success. In running an events company or in operating an events, in organizing an event, syempre we aim for revenue and income. We aim for profit. So there are 3 common financial goals or budget philosophies for an event. It could be you are asked to organize an event for profit, wherein revenues or sales must exceed all expenses, or you are excuse me, you are tasked to organize an event wherein break-even lang ang requirement, revenue equals expenses, kung pila ang nagasto mo, equal pod ang sales or ang revenue nga ning balik, or loss leader or hosted nga events or budget philosophy wherein mas dako ang expenses kaysa sa revenue. It's either the client or event host provides funding to meet the expenses. So, pwede ni siya kanang birthday celebrations, weddings, dili man profit ang goal ana niya. So, muna siya mga loss leader or hosted nga mga budget philosophies. Here are some concerns that should be considered when drafting the budget of an event. So, you ask the client na ba siya gilimit nga budget, na ba siya ihatag daan nga budget range like 10,000, 20,000, 100,000. What are the clients and or organizers financial goals? Will it be for profit, break even, or is it a hosted nga kanang budget philosophy ang gamiton? And ahagikan ang expenses. Will the expenses be from the client themselves or mangita mong sponsors or mag fundraising mo to come up with the money for the expenses? Then, is there an available bridge operating fund na abay ready nga money daan for operations? Or will the client give the operating funds ahead of time so that deposits on the venue and other early bookings can be secured? So, pangutanan mo si client kung sayhon ba niya hatag or unsang arrangement ang iyang gusto in entrusting you with the existing operating fund. Dayon, if mayon si client nga wala siya ana nga budget, kay dito ra kuhaon tanan sa profit ining sugod na ang event, does your event company have funds to tapak ana nga mga deposits? Then, given these conditions, you consider the type of event nga ikuan ninyo to answer the questions or to answer the current nga status sa inyong event, kung for profit, non-profit, or hosted siya. Then what are the venues suited for the event so that you can book earlier, and you can ask kung tagpila ang venue pag rent, or the primary audience so that you can identify kay kinsa ninyo i-market ang event kung it's for profit, and are there secondary targets in case gamay ra ang primary audience and then kulang ang inyong estimate nga sales, and where will the revenues come from, as well as why will people pay for your for the event nga inyong i-organize. So to augment expenses, para ma-less ang expense or naay ikatapak sa mga expenses nga kinahanglan i-incur when organizing, like ibutang taog concert, mugasto man ka na daan before ka mamaligya ticket, you have to reserve a venue, and then sa reservation naman ay deposits. You need to feed your staff sa pag-organize, sa pag-arrange, sa pag-decorate, mga ingon ana. So, mugasto na kadaan. So, how will you cope up with those expenses if ang client nimo is, ang gihatag lang is operating expense and then kulang siya? So, below are some revenue generating activities. You can ask for registration fees if you're organizing a conference or a convention, seminar. Require entrance fees if you're organizing concerts, mamaligya kang tickets. Organize exhibit sales, like if you're organizing an open market, you create booths aron naakay porsyento sa mga booths nga mag-display. Implementing vendor fees, meaning kung nag-organize ka og fair, para maka-display sila dito na ay registration fee kada store or kada booth. You look for sponsorships, mangita kag mo sponsor sa imong event. You advertise your event, area branding as well, and then selling merchandise items and exchanging in X deals. So in exchanging X deals, kanini siyang sa related to sponsorships nga mo ingon ka nga we will feature your product in all our advertisements. We will feature your brand, your logos in exchange for a specific nga item or specific amount of money nga ilang ihatag as sponsorship. So, aside from the revenues and income that we get from organizing events, dili gyud ta daghan og himuon or daghan og gasto when organizing an event. There are so many expenses, but these are divided into two categories: the fixed cost and the variable cost. Ang fixed cost, these are daily costs of doing business, such as salaries, insurance, rent, utilities, equipment, mga dues, monthly dues, subscriptions. These items remain the same despite the changes in factors related to the event. Whether mag-organize mo karon nga month og wedding, and then next month is concert, the same man imong pasweldo sa imuhang mga staff nga regular staff, di ba? The same ang inyong bayronon nga rent sa inyong office, the same dues for electricity, subscription ninyo to butang taog magazines or sa inyong online nga advertisements, the same na siya. So fixed cost na sila. Ang variable cost, these are expenses that vary depending on the factors such as the number of attendees, the kind of food and beverage to be served during the event, the type of accommodations nga ilang pilion, the inclusion of conference kits and other consumables. So, mo po na siya ang variable cost. They vary, mag-change ni siya depende sa event nga inyong i-organize. And then when you add both, FC plus VC equals TC, or total cost. This is the total expenses required to produce an event. The sum of FC and VC. So, some important expense items in the budget. So, when creating a budget, dapat na kay budget para ani nila tanan. One is for the venue. Apil na din ang function room rentals, ang pag-add-ons new structures, kung kinahanglan mo magpanday-panday para sa venue, as well as the accommodations of the VIP guests, speakers, and other staff of the client. Then program also. Expenses for the delivery of the program are listed here. They may include technical riders for sound and lights, fees for performers and speakers, and designs and equipment needed for staging. Marketing. So every event needs a marketing plan. So this will cover the modes of communication to announce the event, attract prospective audience, and visitors or participants. So ang cost sa tanang marketing materials diri ibutang. Meals for the guests, the organizers, and the delegates. Salaries of the staff nga nag-organize, included in the organizing team. Transportation of from various locations to the venue, sa manpower o sa equipment nga gamiton, and then licenses and permits. If you're holding an event in a public space, so kinahanglan man ka na magkuha og licenses and permits, so you also include budget for those. Accommodations for the speakers, panelists, entertainers. So apilo nimo na siya budget. Unsa nga hotel imong i-book tag pilang kwarto didto. Production and staging facilities, lighting fixtures, sound system, LED walls, camera setups, and other technical requirements na siyang na din included. So we will also have your talent fees for your performers and entertainers. Salary sa imuhang production crew, kanto ni silang overall director, floor director, lighting director, backstage managers, mo ni silang mga apilan na sa production crew. So hulan man pud nimo na sila. And then your security team, mga bouncer ba nimo, security guards or marshals. And then contingencies. So event professionals should always be prepared to protect people, property, and propriety information, as well as financial investments and the reputation of the host organization, company, and event organizer. So, usually, mag-assign sila ani og percentage of the total cost as the budget or budget for contingency or risk management. It could either be 10 to 20% of the total cost. So, kung total cost estimated is 100,000, so 10% of 100,000, that would be pila 100,000, 10,000 I guess. So mo na siya ang contingency. So you get 10 to 20% out of the total cost for your contingency. And so I have here below a series of tables showing examples on or a sample of a budget template. So natay different types of event. Natay meetings, natay incentives, then we have conventions, sa mais kini siya, and exhibition. So for each each dimension of mice naatay specific items that we need to consider when budgeting. So for meetings, possible revenues could come from sponsorships, delegates fees, raffle, and merchandising. And then these are the following expenses nga possible nga gastoon. So you just read through this. As well as for incentives. So sa incentives, usually ang company man ani mag-organize and then it's a non-profit event, bali pahalipay lang sa ilahang mga employees. So corporate funding ang revenue ani, ang company or the corporation mismo ang mohatag sa budget. So mo lang ni imong i-plot nga mga items. Then we also have for conventions or conferences, revenues could also come from sponsorships, registration fees sa mga delegates or sa participants, raffles, merchandising. And then, uni siya imong mga dapat budgetan for venue, food, transportation, marketing, event programming, manpower, and others. Lastly, for exhibitions, revenues could come from sponsorships, booth sales, entrance fees, raffles, and merchandising. And then the following are the possible expenses that you need to consider and allocate a certain amount for the budget. So the net income of an event is computed by subtracting expenses from revenue or the total sales. So, butang taog, nag-organize ka og exhibit, and then your total revenue is 500,000, your total expenses is 450,000, then your net income is 50,000. Two formulas may be used to calculate the break-even point. The first calculates the number of attendees needed to break even, and the second calculates the price to be set in order to break even. Now, if this is, you're familiar with the break-even point man, di ba? Kanina siyang point wherein revenues equals expenses, meaning wala ka na gansi, then wala po kay ginansya. Nabawi ra nimo imuhang capital. So, how do you calculate for the number of attendees needed to break even? So, this is computed by registration fee minus variable cost per person equals the contribution margin, or makuha na to ang number of attendees. So, for example, you've set a registration fee of 500 pesos. Kani siya. And then, na-compute nimo ang variable cost per person for 250. And then, nakay fixed cost nga 10,000. So, the contribution margin, kani atong ipangita, would be equal to registration fee nga 500 minus the variable cost nga 250 equals to 250. So, 250 ang ilahang contribution per person. To get the number of attendees, you divide the fixed cost, you divide the contribution margin to the fixed cost. So, 10,000 pesos divided by 250 pesos equals 40. So, ang break-even point nimo, you will reach the break-even point if you will have, or you will be able to have 40 attendees or 40 registrants. So, magkinahanglan makaparegister kag 40 ka attendees or mabawi nimo imuhang gasto. So, how do you check that if sakto ba siya? If the registration fee is 500 times 40, that's 20,000. Minusan nimo sa imong variable cost nga 250 times 40 balik. Kay per person man ang 250, and then kay 40 ka attendees, that would be 10,000 minus the fixed cost nga 10,000. Your income or your loss is 0. So, you've reached the break-even point. And we also have another formula that will help us calculate the price based on the number of attendees. So, ang gihatag sa imuha ni client is number of attendees. So, imuhang computon og pilay registration fee imong iset aron maka break-even point ka. This is done by fixed cost divided by contribution margin equals the break-even point. So, same nga fixed cost, 10,000. Estimated number of attendees, 100. So, mo ni siya gihatag ni client. The variable cost per person is still 250. So, following the formula, 10,000 divided by 100 nga 10,000 divided by 100 nga attendees plus the 250 per person. Okay, i-appeal man ni siya kay variable cost man ni per person. That would be 100 plus 250 equals 350. So, ang registration fee nimo is equals to 350. You check that by multiplying 350 to 100, you get 35,000, and then 250 to 100 nga variable cost, mahimo pa siyang 25,000. Minus na siya ha sa 35. Minus na po ang 10,000 nga fixed cost, then you get the income or loss nga 0, so break-even point. But if inig-minus ninyo tanan ani from your kuan, this is for break-even point lang ha. But it's not necessary that all events kinahanglan break-even point ra gyud taman. If it's for profit, then it's much better that the income is greater. I mean, you compute a greater income. Mo na siya for profit. Siyempre, mag-operate man mo og events company for profit. So, aside from computing your break-even point, you also have to take note of the following taxes. So, there are value-added tax, output VAT, and input VAT. So, you're all familiar man sa VAT, no? Ang VAT stands for value-added tax. So, this is a business tax in the form of a sales tax. So it is a tax on consumption levied on the sale, barter, exchange, or lease of goods or properties and services in the Philippines and on importation of goods into the Philippines. So this is added to every sale or every barter and exchange of goods or properties. So kada mo palit ta og something in the market, in the grocery stores, naa jud tay i-add nga value added tax sa ato ang gihimo nga sale or sa atong gihimo nga exchange. Mo na siya VAT, that is 12% of the total nga ato ang pangpalit nga goods or gi-avail nga services. Then we also have output VAT. This is the value added tax you calculate and charge on the sales of goods and services. It is computed as 12% of the total sales. And then we also have input VAT. Ang input VAT, these are value added tax added to the price when you purchase goods, service, or services liable to VAT. It's computed by dividing the gross sales by 112% and the resulting amount is to be deducted from the total purchases. So to simplify things, output VAT comes from revenues while input VAT comes from expenses. So ang output VAT, kuhaon nimo siya or computo nimo siya from your sales, while the input VAT, you compute that from your expenses. So muna siya ang sa taxes. So that ends for budgets. I will do a separate discussion for contracts.